Shalom, friends. We are alive. We are alive. And we remember, and we cry, and we mourn, and we light a candle today. And this is very important and meaningful. And so today I want to start our meditation by listening to a prayer together, really as a musical meditation. It's El Maleh Rachamim, the prayer that we say for the souls of those who died, and especially those who died in the Shoah, that they may really carried upon the wings of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. And then we'll have a little teaching about Rachamim, about mercy, about compassion, as something that we are called to embody today, especially today in these times of war. So I'm going to start by sharing the song, and I really want to invite you to take it in with your eyes closed. We'll look at the words after, just taking it in, this prayer and connecting to the souls of your deceased or of the 6 millions, as many as you want to connect to.
Veiter
And one of the things that keep us alive is that we open spaces for grieving and spaces for crying and for remembering our dead as one. So, friends, this is a prayer for them in which we call God El Maleh Rachamim, the one who is full of mercy, of compassion. And the victims are called Kedoshim, holy, because they died because they were Jews. That makes them holy. Anyone who dies because he's Jewish, he's considered halachically as dead likiddush Hashem, to sanctify the divine name. And friends, I want to bring us back to today and to share something quite straightforward about what's going on today. What was also going on then, at the time of the Shoah, right after the Shoah. There were voices within the Jewish world, religious voices, who said that happens to Jews because they assimilated, because they had turned away from the path of mitzvot, the path of God, and so this was a punishment. And after October 7, there were Jewish voices, religious voices, who said the same, that the people who died at the Nova Festival were Jews who didn't keep mitzvot, and that's why they died. And thank God we have in the Jewish religious world voices that really stood up against that each time. My husband's rabbi, who is a Haredi Mekubal here in Israel, he had his biggest tantrum against this type of discourse. And he said, "How dare you? These Jews are holy. These Jews full of tattoo and who were on Simchat Torah and Shabbat, desecrating Shabbat and not keeping the religious path of mitzvot, and they're holy." And even because he was speaking to a Haredi, Orthodox crowd, he was using their values and categories, which are halacha more than ethics, unfortunately, too often. And he said, halachically, because they died because they were Jewish, they are kedoshim, they're holy. And so the question is always, what is my responsibility towards the past and towards the present and also towards the future? Because we're not just bystanders, witnesses of our history or of our present history. And we all have a responsibility. And that's compassion towards each other to start with. And I want to share with you just something short from the Parasha Kedoshim. And then there is a teaching from the Piazetz no Rebbe about the same responsibility of compassion that we have. And I want to talk about this in the light of something very difficult I think that Jews are experiencing right now in the world. It's the really very, very deep gap, to put it lightly, between those who support Israel and those who don't support Israel. And there is a lot of tension, to be light about it, between various groups of Jews right now. And the invitation, no matter what your position is to be compassionate with the other side, even if you deeply disagree with them, even if they deeply hurt you. Because only compassion can save us. And we're going to see this with the Piazetz no Rebbe. And unfortunately, in the light of what's going on in the world right now, these words, only compassion can save us, don't feel too strong. So I'm going to share my source sheet. These are the words of the prayer we just saw, and you can read it by yourself. You will have the source sheet. IGS will give you the resources, but I wanted you to see that this is the opening. El Maleh Rachamim, the one full of compassion, talking about these Kedoshim, these holy souls. And here we are, Parashat Kedoshim, in which we have this kind of really, really very important interplay between the two sides of the same coin. Don't hate and love. It's not enough to not hate. You have to actively love. Right? Al tisne et achicha. Don't hate your brother. Belifra, in your heart. Rebuke them, but don't bear a sin on their account by hating them. Don't take revenge. Don't bear a grudge. Ve ahavta larecha kamocha. Why? Ani Hashem. And you shall be holy because I am holy. And so maybe the most important, Aklal Gadol Torah, according to Hillel and Rabbi Akiva, this one, Ve'afta l'reacha kamocha. It's in this parasha, in this week's parasha. And so the question may be, okay, how do we do this concretely? The Yesh Kodesh, the Piazetzno Rebbe, at the heart of the Shoah, during the Shoah, he said, if we want to arouse compassion on high, and to sweeten the decree, le'amtik et adinin. And when we have a very, very difficult situation, we speak of gvura, as if God was doing gvurot with us, like was being severe with us. And we're in the end of the week of gvura right now in the Sfirot, in the Sfirat HaOmer. And he says, if we want to sweeten the decree, sarich leorer bekirbenu, we have to awaken within us rachmanut al Israel zulato, compassion. It's our duty. If we want God to have compassion on us, and boy, do we need this at the moment, both in Israel, in the States, and everywhere else in diaspora, it starts with us. We have to have compassion for each other. So I'll stop here with the Yesh Kodesh. You have the full text of this commentary with you. You can read it later. And friends, let's sit in compassion. And I'm gonna invite us to do a practice of compassion, first for ourselves and our feelings, and then for others, and perhaps for someone in our family who deeply disagrees with our views on Israel right now. Not someone too difficult. Okay, choose someone you can still work with, but practicing compassion, really telling yourself that in the end they're just like you. They're sincere and they want to create a better world, and they think that's the best way. And they just deeply disagree with you on the way to do this. But this is my invitation. It's not an easy practice, so be gentle with yourself and just choose someone you can still work with. Okay? Usually a little bit of distance helps. And it can be abstract also. It can be abstract. For instance, I can share with you that I'm going to now practice compassion towards all the young Jewish kids who've been in the pro-Palestinian manifestations on campuses. And it deeply hurts me as someone who lives in Israel and who feels it's just factually wrong what they're saying, and deeply unfair. But I practice compassion. I know they only want good, and good for the Jewish people and good for the world. So choose whoever you disagree with, but let's start with ourselves. You ready? Okay. So coming to sit, closing our eyes. We'll sit quietly for 4 or 5 minutes. Just being with the body, feeling the breath, just that, feeling the breath moving in and out, letting your thoughts do what they do, and just being in your body, sitting, and in your breath, breathing. Don't try to calm your mind. Let your mind be just as it is. Just focus on feeling this body sitting and breathing, just that. Start with quieting. And if you find it difficult to stay present or to focus today, or if you feel hurt, please start with compassion for yourself and do it physically. Place a hand on your heart, a hand on your belly, and hold yourself. Hold space for your pain. And one more minute. Really holding ourselves in compassion, holding our pain in compassion. Staying present in your meditation, noticing all the temptations to be pulled away, and really giving yourself a chance to really go deep and get something out of this practice. These 3 precious minutes we have left of this practice. The opportunity for some healing, for ourselves and for the Jewish world and for the world, through extending a little bit of compassion within, out. Now I want to invite you to think of someone who disagrees with you on what's going on in this war. And it can be someone you know, it can be an anonymous crowd, someone Jewish, because right now we're working on compassion within Israel. So among our community, within our community. And again, not something too triggering. If it feels too triggering, just come back to yourself. And just seeing the good in them. Seeing how, in the end of the day, most of our ideologies are informed by what we've been exposed to. And what is our social environment, who are our friends, the stories we grew up in and with, the media we see. And cutting through opinions and going right into the heart of this person or this crowd. And saying, I see you. And I can see your yearning for a just society. Your yearning to be proud of Israel. Yearning for goodness and justice. I can see the goodness that you want. And compassion, mercy, irachamim, is holding space like the rechem, the ears. It's holding space for someone else than me. For the last few breaths of this meditation, if you find it too difficult to have compassion for other Jews who think different than you, please pray God that God helps you have compassion for others. And remember that this is how we can bring the compassion from above. And now beyond words, just feeling your heart expand towards everyone in this Zoom today. No matter what they think, including, for instance, if you disagree with others, compassion, compassion. The same yearning for a good world, a just world, and a good Israel, both us as a people and us as a country. And let's bless each other, that our hearts may be open. And that we may be really enlightened to be good and do good. Let's take a beautiful breath in and out, thanking ourselves for our practice, thanking each other, and getting ready to say Kaddish with Rabbi Josh. Sorry for the delay.
Okay. Thank you, Mira. So invite you to stay around for a few moments for conversation and reflections about the practice and questions that you may have in just a moment. Right now, we'll take a moment for those who are reciting Kaddish. If you want to add the name of anyone that you are holding in heart or mind today, and that can include the victims of the Shoah as well. And you can put those names, put anyone you're holding in heart or mind today in the chat, and we'll invite you to unmute. And the text of Kaddish is up on the screen, and you can join me in reciting it. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabba, Be'alma divra chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, b'chaye chon, uvyome chon, u'v'chaye b'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala, v'zman kariv, v'imru, amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach, ve'alam ula'almei almaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitraman, v'yitnatsei, v'yithadar, v'yit'ale, v'yithalal, shmei b'kol. Le'ela, michom birchata, v'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, v'amiran be'alma, v'imru, amen. Yehi shmama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mrama, v'ya'aseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen.
Amen. Kol yoshvei tevel, v'yamru, amen.
Thank you, everybody. So if you need to leave us now, we wish you tzedchem l'shalom, farewell. And if you're able to stay around, we'll welcome Mira back. So thank you so much. Mira is such a powerful practice. I'm sure a lot of people will be curious, the recording, which was the recording that you used at the beginning for Amalei Rachamim, which was extremely powerful. And if you can put the link in there, but that would be great. And I think it's such a powerful teaching. Just the request for and the invitation to rachamim, to compassion, which is just such a I've heard people say it just feels hard. It that like we actually have to summon that, and I wonder how that is, if you're willing, how that is for you right now. How is that showing up for you? How are you drawing on this kind of a practice? How have you seen it be helpful? And I'd ask also others in the chat the same. How was that for you today? And how have you experienced that recently, of trying to summon this rachamim, this compassion?
It's yeah, it's not an easy one. I'll be very honest. I'll be very true. I think compassion may be one of the most difficult practices. And the closer we are to trauma, the more difficult it is to feel compassion. And so I'll be I'll share about my practice, which may be surprising for some of us here, because I am in the midst of trauma. And I know people who died, are hostages, lost their legs. I mean, it's very real. We're very close to trauma. And I want to start by actually talking about someone else than me, an Arab, Muslim, Israeli woman, because as you know, you can be Arab and Muslim and Israeli. Her name is Lucy Harish, and she's a journalist. And there's a wonderful, by the way, interview of her by, I forgot her name, Barry Weiss, where she speaks as an Israeli and as an Arab Muslim about how she experienced October 7th and since. And I have to say also, she's married with an Israeli man. So she's really in between both worlds. And she said, Hamas did one thing, the worst thing they could do to me for a moment, because then she was resilient, I guess, from this. They managed to kill my compassion. She said that on October 7th, she was so shocked. And because she was a journalist, on the day, she was exposed to videos of what was going on. And there are things I haven't seen, I don't want to see. I'm not capable of seeing things. But there are things that can kill your compassion, at least for a while. And she said, for a moment, I could not have compassion for, the children in Gaza who are now dying as civilian casualties used by Hamas as human shields. Just want to say that again because I think people forget that too easily. She said that, and I think it's not easy to acknowledge, and especially for me as a spiritual teacher, but this is a practice of truth, and I am here to share about this in truth. And I want to share that on in November, so that was like less than a month after. I went to a Buddhist retreat in Israel, and I shared, it's hard for me right now to have compassion for the other side. My heart is closed. And sometimes we feel guilty. It's not politically correct. And I think, in the Jewish world, we so want to be right and good that it's almost like we can't say a sentence for Israeli civilians and casualties and death without having to add in for the Gazan civilians. It's also a matter of being politically correct to do this. It's become like, if you don't do this, you're like a monster without a heart. And I think sometimes people forget that this is war and that there are people who've been and who are still just incredibly hurt by what happened and what Hamas is still doing by refusing to release the hostages. And sometimes it feels as if you were asking to people during World War II, to Jews, but you should have compassion for the German civilians, because it's unfair that German kids would die in bombing. That was, what war does. And so I just want to say, as an Israeli, I receive sometimes a lot of requests from, Americans to express, to say, to pray for the Gazan civilians. And I remember at the beginning of the war, I just said, I just need my space right now with Jews to cry among ourselves. Like there are other spaces. And now I'm capable, by the way, of having compassion for Gazans. Although I want to say also, honestly, it's difficult for me because we're so close and because we know how many of them have actually taken civilians and sold them to Hamas, or when they found hostages, they gave them back to Hamas, or that they came right after the massacre to steal from their homes. So it's still difficult, but I'm trying to hold this kind of, so this kind of compassion, the closer you are to the closer you've been touched personally, the more difficult it is. And I think it's very important to start by acknowledging where we're at and to not pretend we're like holier than the Pope, So my practice when my heart is closed is to notice my heart is closed right now. And instead of beating myself up because I'm not politically correct, I can just say, wow, my heart is closed right now. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be this person. Let's attend to the pain. Let's attend to the pain. So that's my practice. If I feel my heart is closed, I'm just going to attend to it. And attending to that doesn't mean indulging and doesn't mean, becoming someone with a closed heart. But I think compassion, recognizing that the closer we are to a wound, the more difficult it is to actually have the distance to embrace more. And yet it's a practice we need to continue doing with the other side, which is the most difficult thing to do in the midst of a war, when you're literally fighting and receiving bombs. And also I think, and this is why I invited us to do this practice with Jews, because we are incredibly lacking compassion for each other when we have different opinions. So I think that's an important thing to do right now, is to have compassion for other Jews. And that's also difficult for many of us, no matter which side we're standing on, to have compassion for those who just see things differently. And again, I just want to say it, and I'll stop here, but remember, friends, our ideologies, most of the time, they come from psychology and they come from life trajectory and history and exposure. So I'm not even attached to, to my own ideology. I try to be as honest as I can and as open and as willing to change my mind as I can, and willing to see facts, and I just want to say this also. I want to add this. I am very adamant about, if my side does any abuse, any torture, to denounce it and to fight it, And thank God we have people in Israel doing this. So I just want to say this. Supporting Israel does not mean supporting blindly or pretending that we're white. Nobody's white. Nobody in the war is innocent. Nobody who has a state or an army is innocent. It's impossible. So it's all about taking responsibility, and that's the how do you say it? The responsibility of each side to take responsibility for themselves.
Mm.
That was a very vulnerable, honest sharing. So I hope you'll have compassion for me if you have a very differing opinion. And if you don't, that's fine too. Just be with your heart.
Thank you. I feel like it's sort of just a mic drop. I'm not sure. We would call that a mic drop. Like, okay, I said my thing and now we're just going to put down the microphone. One note, just one footnote. I think at the end, just now when you're saying nobody is white, I think what you meant is no one is pure.
Yeah,
Like
thank you.
you didn't mean it in a racial way. You meant that no one was no one
Thank you.
was,
Sorry.
yeah,
It's French. It's a French thing. It's a French. I'm still French.
I assumed. So and I think it's so important what you're saying about, I mean, I've heard that same thing from so many of my friends and loved ones in Israel about this challenge of compassion or empathy. And at this, and that the whole point of Torah is that even when we don't feel those things, that we still have to try to summon them, right? We still have to try to behave in the right ways. And so, on the one hand, there's that goal, the ethical imperative that we aspire to. There's the reality of where we may be. There's the wanting to treat ourselves kindly and with compassion, even because of the gap that may be present. And all of those things can all be real, at the same time. And I think the point of our practice, hopefully, can be to give us greater skill and greater ease in wherever we're at, not putting up additional resistance to whatever is the reality, like being true with the reality that we're in, and not creating, the additional resistance that causes us more pain and more generates more heat than light, so much of the time. So yes, thank you. And it's really, obviously, that seems like it's resonating with a lot of people here. And it's interesting, I mentioned last week, I think I wrote this on Friday, but like, it's such a striking thing that coming out of Pesach that we were reading about Yom Kippur, and somebody here mentioned, Yom Kippur, and just the touchstone of Rachamim that's there, right? And it seems like it's just kind of calling to us now to try to awaken this as much as we can in our lives. So yeah, thank you so much for the teaching and the practice today. And I'll give you just a chance, if you have, in our final 30 seconds, if there's anything else that you wanted to share by way of concluding.
I would say just hold on. I think it's just important to realize that oops, I think we need to mute friends for now. That as Jews globally, we're not just in post-trauma right now, we are in the trauma, and it's continuing, right? It's moving from, Israel to the States, and we can really, I really believe in what the Piazatzno Rebbe is teaching us. And if you want to remember one thing for today, I really recommend remembering this. If we want the divine source of life to have compassion for us, we need to start by having compassion for each other. Let's just start by that. And by being able to still hold someone in our heart, even if their words or opinions hurt us. That doesn't mean agreeing. That doesn't even mean having to talk about it. There are people, I just don't get into some conversations because I'm not capable. And please know your limits. I think I would end with this today. Know your limits, but you can still love someone and deeply disagree with them. This is wisdom. Can you imagine the crippled world we would create if we would speak only to people we agree with? God save me. I will end on that.
Okay. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow at our regular time. And Yeah, thank you, and wishing you all a meaningful rest of your Yom HaShoah wherever you are. Thank you, Mira.